opportunity. It's a pleasure to introduce, it's a covet to introduce our very, very special guest, R Yosef Mendelevitch. For those of us who remember the years of communism and the underground yeshiva movement, the underground B'nai Torah movement that is in Russia during the communist regime, Rabbi Yosef Mendelevitch was one of the heads, if not the head, of the underground Torah movement. He was the editor of an underground newspaper. In fact, I understand that he tried to hijack a plane to go to Eretz Yisrael, and he ended up for 11 years in prison for that. And but Baruch Hashem, in those years, the name of Rabbi Yosef Mendelevitch was everyone knew that we were protesting for Rabbi Yosef Mendelevitch to be freed, and finally, when he did gain his freedom, he visited all the yeshivas in America at the time. I remember Yisrael, the Rosh Yeshiva, had a tremendous hasifa for him in the yeshiva. I heard from Albert Miller that he remembers that when he was in Yeshiva of Denver, the entire yeshiva with the Rosh Yeshivas went to the airport to greet him with banners, and they danced in the airport. He is a hero of enormous proportions, and that is the type of Bruchim Aboyim that he deserves, and that really should be for him. He is someone who has done tremendous accomplishments, tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. Because of him, there are so many today who are Shemei Torah mitzvahs, so many today connected to Torah, and he was from the Yechidei Segula who went against the entire communist regime and to fight them, become what was called a refusnik, and to mock them and to do everything against them to keep Torah in ways that are unbelievable to us. I'm sorry that it's a little bit late, but the weather did not hold out the way we'd have liked it to be. So things are a little bit later than they would have been, but it's a tremendous covet to present Harav Yosef Mendelevitch.
It's really by chance that I meet you. Nothing is by chance, certainly. I spent Shabbos far away in Bosman, and then I noticed that I have to stop in Minneapolis, and the time until I go to Eretz Yisrael will take some 8 hours. So I asked the local Rov maybe to find connections, not to just spend there to sit in the airport, to do something good for Am Yisrael, and this is how it come together. So I'm glad for the organization, and I couldn't expect a big audience. Anyway, I understand that today my drosh is not prepared. It's directly from the board of the airplane to see you. I'll tell you something for the beginning. Recently, I was in Lakewood, and a certain Rosh Mesifta found a book of Kovetz Shurim of Rav Elchanan Wasserman Zatzal Hayad, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, page Tzadi Aleph. Elchanan Wasserman tells that he went to see, it was before the Second World War, come to see Chofetz Chaim, and Chofetz Chaim told that he can't understand why the Russian Jews wouldn't fight against communism, this weapon. So and then the Rosh Mesifta turned to me and told Mendelevitch heard the order of Chofetz Chaim and fought against communism. So I didn't know, certainly, but I felt that it is what is needed to do. And later on, Chofetz Chaim explained that during Purim, there was a physical danger. So it was a tefillah and tanis, whatever, but during Hanukkah, it was a shmat, the sakona of shmat, and then we understand that it is a time to fight with weapon against our enemies. And certainly in Soviet Russia was exactly the case of shmat. I was born after the Second World War. But the Soviets, the communists, including Jewish communists, closed yeshivas, killed rabboim, whatever. It was a terrible shmat. And it is why when I was born after the war, there was no people around that could educate us, no possibility to learn. Maybe somewhere secretly some small groups, but the majority of Russian Jewry was exposed to assimilation, which happened, same that happens now in America. At that time, in my age, in the 60s, 70s, the assimilation, mixed marriages, came to the rate of 70%. So it was obvious that the only way to save as much as possible is to break through the Iron Curtain and take people out. So for the beginning, and it was already mentioned, the major development in the 60s was that we, regular Soviet Jews, managed to establish an underground Jewish educational system of maybe thousands of members. And it was a success, for we are not educated. We didn't know anything. And it is another miracle that Am Yisrael in every situation can come from zero to a certain achievement, to a certain level, studying underground groups, for beginning teaching Hebrew, Jewish history, tradition, and then Torah and mitzvahs. But you know, it's really on provision. Otherwise, we can't explain it. No logical context of whatever happened. In the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, all of a sudden, Russian Jewry got a vacant and started doing something. You know, the famous writer, Elie Wiesel, Olav Sholem, visited in the 60s Soviet Russia, and he published a book, Silent Jewry. Means silent Jewry, we are silent, we are going to die, that's all, everything lost. But certainly, Elie Wiesel did know that we do exist. It was existing exactly the time that we start establishing our so-called underground ulpanim. For it was everything secretly. Maybe it was not secretly for KGB, but it was secret for people outside who would know about that. So it is, I wrote several books on the issue, and I try to explain the logic of development step by step of the underground Jewish movement, but it's, maybe not the time. I will tell you more stories. Later on, maybe I will visit you again and tell the beginning. But it should be remembered, it was a real miracle. That all of a sudden, in the 60s, in the 70s, assimilated Russian Jews. I was myself a member of Communist Youth Movement. I was a member of Communist Youth Movement. And I established my group. And then, as it was mentioned already, we managed to establish nationwide underground educational system, and I became an editor of this newsletter, monthly, being at age 20, 21, 22, being an editor, since it was a career, but later on it was a different development. For I thought to my friends, see, it's good that we are teaching people, But how much people can we have in our underground ulpanim? We had chapters in Moscow, in Leningrad, nowadays Petersburg. I'm originally not from Russia, I'm from Latvia, Letland. But at the time it was occupied by the Soviets, so we had in Riga, in Vilna, in Kharkov, in Kiev, in different places. But how much people can be saved? Maybe, as I mentioned, maybe 1,000, 2,000. But that time, Russian Jewry, Soviet Jewry counted some 3 million people. And even the young generation, my strata, would count some maybe 100,000 people. How much we can be saved? There is no way. So we looked for a way to escape Soviet Russia, and I will bring you a story that I visited a certain office in charge of giving permissions. That time you couldn't buy simply a ticket and go. Nowadays in Russia it's possible, but our time you had to ask for special permission of the authorities that let them permit to, we would call it, reunite our families, after Holocaust, whatever, it never would help. So people wouldn't come, for it was obvious if you come to this office and you declare that you're willing to leave Russia, they would say, okay, you are not loyal to our government, not to our ideology. How at all you can study in our university or have a job in our enterprise? They will fire people, so people would risk and not go, not never declare. And then Soviets got a false concept that the Jews are quiet, that they are ready to assimilate whatever, which was not true. People simply were not ready to tell whatever they think, for it was dangerous. It was considered as a crime. Anyway, as a young man, as already at that time an activist, one of the leaders of this underground Jewish movement, I went to this specific office, and it happened what I would expect, that the head of the office told me. What he told me, you would like to go to Israel, you young man, don't I understand that you will be drafted in the army and then you will fight against our brethren Arabs? And then he told, okay, you are studying now in our university, accomplish your studies, and you will build communism, and never will you be able to go out from Soviet Russia, you will die here in Soviet Russia. And then he drove me away. Certainly I was not ready not to build the communism and not to die in Soviet Russia. And it happened by chance that that time in one of underground groups, as we called it, Ulpanim, in Petersburg, studied a former pilot in Russian Air Forces, a Jew himself, Mark Dimshitz. So he suggested to hijack a Russian airplane. We figured, for the beginning, to hijack a bigger airplane, but it means to buy tickets for, say, whole airplane with some 150 passengers. We figured that the moment the airplane will land, say in Sweden, and whole families would walk out, it would be obvious to everybody that it is not hijacking, it's simply exodus. But later on, for some reasons, we had to stop this project, and we come to a smaller one. Mr. Dimshitz checked a certain route that would bring a very small airplane of some 12 passengers close to a Finnish border, and then he told them the airplane is landing in a forest, for it is assigned for tourists. So tourists would walk out, and the airplane would go back, not having any security on the field. So it was the best way. We figured at the moment, we bought all the tickets on the board, only 12 tickets for all the passengers, and we figured the moment he would land in a forest and open the door to let us out, we would ask him politely that maybe he would leave himself and stay for a while in the forest, or we would like to go to Sweden. And we planned to have in Sweden a press conference calling upon world Jewry and world public opinion to help us out from Russian Soviet slavery. So for the beginning, it looked very smooth. And then we arrived. I will describe you a day before, a day later. We arrived. It was 1970. We arrived from Riga to Leningrad, Petersburg, and stayed in a forest close to this small local airport. There were rumors that we are being watched, followed by secret services, but try not to think about that. Mr. Dimshitz himself, a resident of Leningrad, come to our forest to instruct us how to behave, for indeed it is a really military operation. Everybody has to know his place during taking over, for there was another pilot and he had a weapon, so we got ourselves a weapon. And he divided us in specific groups, like a military man. We had to repeat our task, whatever. And then discussing it, sitting, we had a fire, some barbecue. Certainly at that time I already would eat a treif sausages, but they ate and laughed. It looked really very, very positive. Tourists, young people are laughing and eating. And then we noticed that two black cars come to our direction. And certainly it was a KGB type. We did know that it is KGB. And some plainclothes people walked out from the cars, started going to our direction. So we felt tensed, what will happen. But then, after a while, they turned back and drove away. Anyway, it was strange. So some friends would say, they know about our schemes, let us escape, let us run away. And I thought, see, if really they know about our scheme, they will certainly arrest us in every way, even if we escape. But then, if they arrest us during running away, it will be our failure. I thought, let us be arrested or killed on the way out from Soviet Russia. Then it will be a symbol that the people would know that 10 young Jews were ready to sacrifice their lives from Israel. Not everybody was glad, but Major Dimshitz supported my suggestion, and we decided that we are going up to the end. Next morning we slept in the forest. Next morning we went to the local airport. And then it was announced boarding. Everybody started going to the smaller airplane, for it was a local airport, and everything was done by foot, no buses, nothing. And then we saw already this airplane standing there waiting for us. And then all of a sudden I noticed that my friends looked at me. I was the last in the line, so I asked myself, what's the reason they are looking at me? And then I understood, as if I understood. I had a black beret to cover my head, and before leaving the forest, the friends told, remove your beret, it looks strange, you know, in Russia people don't go in summer with berets. And then I refused certainly to remove the beret. Now I thought to myself, what? We are going to bring freedom to our nation and they are still taking care of my beret. But then I understood it's not the reason. The real reason, I looked myself around and I understood what the reason of them being tensed. Major Dimshitz missed. So he could be arrested, and maybe he arrived with his wife and two small daughters. So maybe in the last moment, his wife told him, you know, what you're doing, you know, you're sacrificing your family. Who knows? But anyway, we had our pilot, and without a pilot, no reason to go on the board. So I decided myself that I will run back and I will look for Mr. Dimshitz on the spot. For I figured that maybe he stayed with his family outside the small building of the airport. And then I start running, and indeed I found him sitting there in outside the airport, eating some sandwiches. Mr. Dimshitz had even a guitar. He played guitar. I got that angry. I told, we are going to bring freedom to our nation, and you are eating your sandwiches. How it comes together? So he checked his watch, and he told what they started now the boarding. According to the timetable, the boarding has to start 9 o'clock in the morning, and now it is only 8:30. He told me, I don't like it. There is something wrong in it. So I told him, forget about that. You are used to Russian army. Everything is strict. It's not army. Things change. He hesitated for a while, and then he told me, okay, I am joining you. So I start running back, and just to mention how excited I was to know that I'm privileged to do something for my nation. I felt that I don't belong to myself anymore. I belong to Am Yisrael. And it's why I was not afraid to die. For as a human being, I wouldn't exist anymore. Everything for Am Yisrael. So when I come gladly to inform my friends that I solved the problem, and I am bringing the pilot, when I entered the spot that I left them, I was beaten, thrown on the ground, my hands handcuffed, and laying with my nose in the beton. I thought, okay, we are alive, no, we are not shot, so it's a positive side of it. So when I was lifted, my glasses fall down, but I still could see that the friends, the times that I would run back and back, come to the airplane, and they later told me that paratroopers jumped out from the airplane, and some more soldiers come from around, with dogs, whatever, and all of them were already handcuffed. The bitter scenery. And then I heard shootings. I turned around. They shot at Mr. Dimshitz. He remained alive, but he was wounded, and a lot of blood would run on his forehead. It was a terrible picture. His wife, Nebach, crying, and two small daughters altogether bewildered. I understood it's real tragedy. So there was no time to think about anything. Each of us was taken in an office, separate office of this airport, and then we understood that it was a trap. For in each small room there were high-ranked KGB officers to search us. I was pushed in my office, so-called my office. There were two Russian colonels of secret services. They produced a sheet of paper that it was like an order issued by the prosecutor of the area to arrest us, and it would read like that. That according, it would say that according the information of secret services of Soviet Union on the territory of the airport is acting a Jewish terrorist organization that has an aim harm state security, betray Russian motherland, and run away to an imperialistic country. So, and then in the bottom line there was that I ordered to arrest them, to a question, and if it is true, they should be warned that they expect death penalty. So, to tell the truth, I was not that glad to read as we say, the Unterste Shure, the bottom line. I was ready to die, but I figured that there were shootings and they will shoot me. Or maybe coming in the air, they can shoot us with a rocket or whatever. But now I thought to myself, I have to go through the interrogation and questioning of KGB, and then if they really decide a death penalty, I have to sit and wait until they take me execute, It's something, you really have to be a hero to go through all of it. I am not a hero, I am a regular man. I would say, friends, it's a mistake, I cannot do it, But nobody asked me. A brave hobby, so I had to be a hero, against my will. Now they sent us to the interrogation, and it was very bitter for the majority of our friends. Got broken, start cooperating, and I understood that their scheme was to arrest us, to break our will, and to have like a trial, a performance, that everybody of us would declare not only guilty, but blame over American jury that you infected us with the ideas of nationalism and whatever, and call upon Russian jury to sit back and quietly assimilate and forget about that. And as a matter of fact, as I mentioned, the friends started cooperating, and they were excited that they succeeded to put the trap, and we fall in the trap, and we lost everything. More than that, the whole education movement was crashed. For more people were arrested. All literature, whatever we had, was confiscated. It was something terrible. I blamed myself for doing that. For also, my friends told me, other friends that were more involved in education would say, it will not help. You cannot cheat the secret services. They certainly will arrest you, and they will arrest us. And you, with your hands, you will crush the whole movement. Now I blamed myself for not listening to them. Also, still I believed that the only way is to take people out from Soviet Russia. But I evidenced the reaction of whatever happened, and it was a bitter time. I was not afraid to be killed, but to know that because of me, a lot of people are arrested, their apartments searched, and children remain without a father, is something terrible. It's a long story. I will not repeat, but I will move fast. So after half a year, that they cooked up everything, and they felt that everything is ready for the performance, they start the trial. We were isolated. We had no approach to a lawyer, not to relatives. But somehow, when we entered the room of the court, a friend of mine had a meeting with his brother, and he whispered me, "Yosef, today is Hanukkah." When I got to know that it is Hanukkah, I thought, not by chance. As we say in Yiddish, "Is geworden mir richtig in der Regen." I understood that the Ribono Shel Olam arranged our trial during Hanukkah. Certainly there will be Nisim and Yeshuas. And it happened. The first man that was broken under interrogation was Mr. Dimshitz himself. He would give evidences right there on the spot in the airport. And I can understand him, for he expects certainly a death penalty. His wife was arrested, and two daughters were under the arrest. He has something to lose. So he should be the first performer. And they told him, "Mr. Dimshitz, you were a major in Russian army, a member of Communist Party, and then you graduated from our university, you got the engineering degrees, whatever, you got everything from your motherland. How at all you come to betray your Russian motherland? And when you are listening from outside, looks real, how the man can do this." So Mr. Dimshitz rose and he told, "I accuse the Soviet government in anti-Semitism. You suppressed our national emotions. You closed all yeshivas, all schools, all educational institutions. You try forcibly assimilate us. And then there's the anti-Semitism in studies, in working. And the very fact," he told, "that you support the Arabs against Israel, and you explain with all kind of political reasoning, not true. Finally, Jews has their own Jewish country, and you hate it because it is Jewish." So he spoke for a long time. He collected facts, whatever. Pity I had no time to remember everything, but it was really behavior of a real hero. And I figured that maybe he started cooperating from the very beginning, for otherwise maybe they would shut him on the spot. So he prepared himself to speak out, and he spoke out. "Sit down." Now they looked for somebody else that would still act according to their scheme of performance. And there is a courageous woman, Silva Zalmanson. Her husband, Eduard Kuznetsov, expected 2 death penalty, for he already served 7 years for anti-Soviet activities. And when you are arrested twice, as we call shor muad, like he repeats the same. So it's certainly death penalty. So she cried all the time. And they felt that she is broken. Silva, you studied in our university, you got engineering degrees, you worked in an enterprise as an engineer, you got everything from your country. How at all you betray your motherland? So he answered, for every Jew swears from his childhood, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. So the judge asked for translation. She told, no need, I will translate you. And when she translated in the Russian language, I saw the judge is going to collapse. For he was promised that everything is set. And all of a sudden, everything got broken. And then, the moment the two courageous people set the standard of behavior, all others followed. Each of them would declare an imami. I looked to my friends, I was proud of them. Also, I felt bitter before that they cooperated and whatever, more people were arrested. But the moment we figured to have a press conference in Sweden, we had the press conference right there in the court. I looked at them and I thought they are lighting the candles from their bodies. Milajdo midam. So finally it was my turn. They didn't know that they can't expect anything from me, but according to the procedure, everybody should be questioned. So they asked Mendelevitch, why you studied in our university, etc., etc. Why would you betray your Russian motherland? I told Russia is not my motherland. I told Ribbon Shalom, give Eretz Yisrael to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I am their grandchild, so it's my place there. So the prosecutor told to the judge that asked the question, he told, in vain would you ask Mendelevitch a question? Don't you know he is a religious fanatic? You know, we cannot understand how the man studied physics, thermodynamics in our university and is that limited in his interest only Am Yisrael, Torah mitzvahs. So certainly for me it was the best blessing that like Bilam would certainly he tried to hint that I have to get a penalty, a harsh penalty, but for me it was really an achievement that the enemies admit they am a fanatic Jew. That I was not that fanatic, I was not that educated, but still in my behavior during the interrogation, they understood that I am not their type of Soviet citizen. And then they produced 2 death penalties, and I got 15 years of imprisonment for harming Soviet security, 15 years of imprisonment for trying to take over their Soviet property, and only 7 years of underground Jewish activities. But this makes difference, you know, life sentence and death sentence. Life sentence means life, death sentence is a sentence. And then after a while, in the end of Hanukkah, the very friends that told me about Hanukkah knocked at my wall. We were seated next to each other. And that time I understood, I did know that somebody knocking at the wall, he's willing to speak. You take a mag and listening to the place when he would knock, and he spoke there through the mag, and he told me, I had a meeting with my brother, and he told that under heavy world public opinion, the Russian canceled death penalties and softened all other penalties. You got only, he told me, you got only 12 years of imprisonment. Me, him, 10 years, and Silva got 8 years of imprisonment at all. So we understood it is a real victory. So why I told you how we fall in the trap. Like we were stupid. We had good intentions, but we lost. And somebody with his mighty hand took us from our failure and bring the victory. Certainly it was direct involvement of Yad Chazaka, as we say, Yad Chazaka, Tzien Hashem Mitzrayim, it was it, you know. The Russians were glad and enjoyed the Jews falling trap, everything is okay, and they couldn't understand how, in a week, everything changed. And instead of winners, they became losers. More than that, I was told later that Brezhnev, that time the head of of Soviet Union, called the KGB person that arranged everything and asked, what's happening, he told Brezhnev. prime ministers and presidents are calling me, and the old kind of protest, whatever. What happened? So it was the head of Communist Party of this Leningrad district, and he told, we had a smart operation. 10 Jews fall in our trap. They try to escape, and they fall. And then Brezhnev told, stupid, we fall. I fall in your trap. I need the Western technology. I need trade. I need good relations. And because of you, that you wouldn't inform me and wouldn't consult me, I'm losing everything. So he fired him from his position. It was real achievement. And then we were sent to serve our time. By the way, I mentioned being here. You never ask where I was in Siberia. Here is much more worse than in Siberia. Much more colder. I recently, like a week ago, was in Siberia going to different Kihiles. There it was minus 6 Celsius. And here is something terrible, So real Siberia is here. Anyway, what I was bothered with is certainly not the temperature, not the food, but mostly how I will be able to fulfill my mitzvahs and obligation as a Jew in a concentration labor camp. And it happened. The day I arrived, I was brought to the specific labor camp. I was approached by a young man. He told me, Shalom Chaver, ma shlomcha. So I understood he spoke Hebrew, but it was that much that he did know. And he told me his story. That time, a lot of Jews were involved in trying to improve the face of communism. Normally, Jews take care on other nations, not on themselves. So the whole group of Jews, the speaker of Knesset nowadays, Edelstein, was a part of it. He was not arrested, he was younger, but all of them, 5 people were arrested, sentenced to different punishments. And then their head, nowadays Rabbi R Yosef, told friends, let us stop to take care on the Russian nation. We have to be Orthodox Jews. And then the boy, the guy that approached me in a prison camp told me, it's the decision. But I am ignorant. I don't know what does it mean to be an Orthodox Jew. It's nowadays rather known Russian rabbi, Rav Shimon Grilius. At that time he was ignored like me, only Russian communist education. So he told me when I heard that a group of Jewish hijackers were being arrested in the airport, I asked Ribbon Shalom that may he send me somebody that can me educate. Can you me educate? How to be Jewish? I told, yes, I can teach you. So he told me, teach me now. I told him, Shimon, according to their procedures, in the morning there is a roll call, and then they send you immediately to the factory to work the whole day, and in the evening you're going back to sleep, and again in the morning go to work. So I told Shimon, let's go to sleep. Now it's late at night. And later on in the factory, I will tell you whatever I know. Shimon got angry with me. He told me, what? I hate myself being as a goy for 2 years, and now you say, wait another night? I demand teach me now, on the spot. He's a Litvak from Vilna. So his mother is Strashun, in Gemara, Strashun. But he was already assimilated. So anyway, as far as I did that much that I could tell it in 5 minutes, I told him, see, Shimon, we need keep Shabbos, and we have to try to avoid eating dry food. And then we had to get chumash and a siddur, and we have to get yarmulkes to cover our heads. So Shimon told you, it is a prison for specifically dangerous political prisoners. Nothing is possible. If you refuse to work on Shabbos, they will put you in punishment room, you will die there. If you refuse eating their food, there is no other food. And then he told me, you mentioned chumash and a siddur. When, say, the last time the Russians would publish Chumash and Siddur? Never. And according to their law, we are permitted to have some books, but only printed, published in Soviet Russia. There is no way, you would like to be a good Jew, but there is no way to do that. There's for everything you have to pay with your life. And then he told me, you mentioned in Yarmulke, I have an idea. See, he told, I have long pants, let me cut pieces of my pants, and I have a thread and a needle, and we can make yarmulkes. So it is how we start keeping mitzvahs with our yarmulkes. Later on, Shimon told, there is one man from Bessarabia that killing agriculture, and he would say that some grass, herbs growing in the yard of the labor camp are eatable. Not all of them, and he found that specific herbs that are eatable, so we start eating herbs. Never say that Mendelevitch ate grass. We ate vitamins, And then he told later that there was a Georgian community in the prison of Georgians that fought for independence of Georgia. So he thought they got a certain plant very rich with protein. Okay, we have to get the herb. We exchanged for some bread, got some samples of this herb, and I start growing it. I had a green garden in the back of my barrack, so I would take care of my green garden. And during the day, I enjoyed my life. I thought, imagine, only a year ago I expected this penalty, and now I have my green garden, taking care. Beautiful, life is good. So after a while, taking care of this green garden, I heard somebody is yelling, "You prisoner, what you doing there? Come here." So I looked, there was a whole group of high-ranked Russian officers. I believe they were from Moscow, like inspection. So I come up, I figured that they will ask me why I'm eating the grass. I would answer, it's, but the condition you established. But when I come to see the officers, you can see the big Russian guys with everything uniform, everything is bleaching, and one of them would say, "Hey, what's on your head?" I explained that's Jewish tradition, that every Jew has to cover his head, etc., etc. He listened patiently, and he told me, I understand, you are Jewish, you are religious, Okay, you can be religious, he told me, no problem with me, but inside of you. The moment you put a yarmulke on your head, is like manifestation. You try to influence other people that would behave like you. It's a violation. And then he told me, see, I have a list of belongings that you are permitted to have as a prisoner. There are not such thing in a list. So never say people that he understood that once I will be out and I will tell that I was punished for being religious, so never say that you're punished for being religious, just for violating our rules. So remove immediately this piece of cloth from your head. I refused, certainly. So he called the soldiers. They beat me, threw me on the ground. I tried to protect my yarmulke with my hands, but what could I do against the soldiers? And then they did the same to Shimon. But Shimon had some more pants, so we cut some more pieces of cloth and produced more yarmulkes, and it started. Each time they would find that we are covering our head, they would put us in punishment rooms, sometimes cutting our food twice. Was anyway not enough food, they would cut twice as a punishment. But finally they give up. We understood that we won. They would say, you brought here fanatic Jews, what can we do? Every supervisor is a paid officer, and his salary is not ready to chase after fanatic religious Jews. So they stopped doing it, but not altogether. Now I had, as a regular prisoner, I had the right to meet my parents once in a year. It's like a private meeting. There was a room that they would come and bring some food. So I asked my father, I am orphan from Ayasam, from my mother, when I was a child of 10, but still my father would come and ask him to bring some kosher food and tell more stories about immigration. For I forget to mention that immediately after our trial, the Soviets, their heads, Politburo, decided that they understood, as they would say, that there are still a lot of Jews infected by nationalism. And they assumed that it is like 10%, and that its decision was, through 10 years, to let out from Soviet Russia some 10% of the Jewish population, which would come to 300,000 Jews, which happened. For a year after our trial, some 15,000 Jews got permission to leave, whereas before that there were only hundreds, and now it was 15,000, and next year it was 30,000, and then it went to 35,000. It was not even sometimes going up, going down, but the immigration started, so I was interested to know from my father what is going on in the world, etc., etc. So being glad and seeing that my father arrived, imagine from Latvia to Siberia is maybe some tens of thousands of kilometers. It would take some days to go. And before entering the room, I was stopped by the officer, and he told me, "You are violating our rules. Remove your yarmulke, or otherwise I will punish you for that." Certainly I refused. So he told me, "Your meeting is cancelled." I thought, at least let me embrace my father and explain what's happening. They closed the door. "No, you are criminal, you are terrorist, nothing, you will be punished for that," and that's all. So I couldn't explain my father, and they certainly would say, your son is a dangerous criminal, and he doesn't behave well in a prison as well. So my father would never write me a letter telling, Yosef, I'm an old man, who knows how much can I see you again, maybe it would be the last time, so please behave. I felt that bitter, that I was sure that if I would explain my father, he would be proud of me, but I had no possibility. Everything was blacked out, censorship. So it happened next year the same. I was already ready for that. My father came, remove your yarmulke. I was almost crying, for I did know that covering the head is not the biggest mitzvah. But sometimes, as we say, there is no kalaki chamura. The goyim believe it is important for us. I felt that it is it. I have to protect the honor of my nation, Yaregu Bal Yavor. For if I start giving up something small, they won't understand that it is small. I declare that it is Jewish tradition. So nothing is important for Jews. For some kosher food, he is ready to give up his tradition. And then I protected myself. The moment they would find out that I am a weak person and I compromise and I give up, they will push me to the wall. So I had no way out. And it took time. After 7 years after my arrest, my father passed away. I never could see him. Anyway, Shimon was released earlier. He spent only 5 years, so he came to explain him. And I know that my father was pleased and proud that I behave and I don't give up, don't compromise. When he passed away, that time Henry Kissinger, the state secretary, asked President Brezhnev to permit to bring my father to Kever Israel in Eretz Israel, so he's on Har Hazeisim, and certainly when I was released, I come to see his kever and ask for mechile, but I believe it was not something wrong. We should know. We are soldiers. We were soldiers. We have to fight. We can't give up. We can't compromise. And then there was another story with food. It turned out there was Ukrainian prisoners. They were cooperative. two kinds of Ukrainian prisoners. One kind, the police that collaborated and killed the Jews. But there was a young generation that had an inspiration to establish their state, Ukrainian state, and they would say me, see, we Ukrainian people never had our state. But you finally got your state, and you serve us as a symbol that maybe, who knows, we shall have our state as well. And it is why they supported us and helped a lot. There was a lot of Ukrainians arrested in the prison, hundreds of them. So one of them was in charge of reporting the production of how much would you produce in a factory. In fact, the work was not that big, but the quantity of production that they would demand, it was something enormous. If you don't make 100% every day, you'll be punished, put in punishment room. And I was young, and I have two hands that are very working the same quality, so I could produce it easily. And all the time I would use it to educate more my student Shimon. And then it turned out that another prisoner is working as a cook in a kitchen. And he explained us that when he is making his soup, that is the main treat, for the beginning, he cooks only vegetables, and in the end, and he would add some animal fats or bones or whatever. So he promised us that he would put aside, before he adds the animal fat, put aside for us. And you can imagine, after a day of work, a whole long line of hundreds of prisoners are standing to get their portion of hot soup. Then my turn. He looked in the window and told me, no, today I wouldn't manage to put you separately. Today you cannot eat. I got my mashgiach, So what to do? He would say, I save for you some pieces of bread. When I finish the distribution, go in the back door of kitchen, I will give you some bread. And the Goyim would say, you Jews set for us the standard of the behavior of a religious man. The Goyim learned from us. We became a symbol, as we say, early Goyim. How the Jews are really religious people, never give up, never compromise. And then another miracle happened. We found that a certain guard is smuggling inside food for money to other prisoners. Mostly chocolate, a vitamin, and tea. If you boil 50 grams of tea in water, it becomes like narcotics. So they would sit around the table and drink the tea. We asked our relatives that would, I had no approach to my father, other Jewish prisoner had meetings, and they notified the specific guard that should be approached and bribed and to bring some sforim aside. So one day I was informed that my siddur is smuggled inside, and he is under my mattress. Back from the enterprise to my barrack, I lifted the mattress. It was a beautiful siddur. That beautiful that it would never be produced in Soviet Russia. So I couldn't use it. I couldn't take it from under the mattress. On the second floor of my ward was an Ukrainian policeman that certainly would inform immediately the authority that Mendelevitch is having a strange book. So what to do? I decided that for the beginning I will go voluntarily work at night. They had 3 shifts around the clock, and the most hated shift certainly was at night, when you go to work 11 p.m. and go back 6 a.m. But I would voluntarily go to work at night. For coming back to the barrack, it was almost as empty, and I could down. Later on, I decided that I will copy down my siddur in small pieces of paper that big as a matchbox. So in the case they would confiscate my real siddur, I would have this copy. And I made twice the copies, and finally, when I finished the second copy of my siddur, I understood that I remember everything by memory. You can understand what a kind of feeling it was. You, I believe, know it from your childhood, from the school. We never were taught davening. And then all of a sudden, I remembered Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, everything, which brought me another dimension of freedom. For imagine if I am in a punishment room, you are stripped, almost naked. You don't have anything. Day after day, week after week, you can go crazy without not doing anything. And I had my tefillah. So I would start in the morning by memory, and I felt that I escaped the prison. I was no more there with the guards. Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, whatever, it was my escape from the prison. So I was afraid to finish my tefillah. And I would go at least for 3 hours, just making chazones and enjoying it. After that, back to the bleak reality. But again, the mincha, whatever, and then you can think about whatever you mentioned in the tefillah. And then, like here in Minneapolis, there was a lot of snow. The fact I told you that I prayed in the morning, but imagine there were tens of prisoners in one barrack. It's stinking, and there was no electricity, so it was hardly appropriate to down there. I decided the only reason to leave the barrack was to go to the toilets. They built a huge toilet for all the prisoners, some maybe 100 meters away from the barracks. Can imagine in weather like that, at night you have to go to the toilet, just, another torture. But for me it was a privilege, for I could walk out like I'm going to the toilet. I made like a shelter in snow, staying close to the pathway, and I would daven. And the moment I heard them coming, that the snow would scratch, I would go myself to the toilet. Once they caught me in the snow. What are you doing there? No, I'm going to the toilet. So the officer told me, you cannot cheat me. I know that you are doing something against our regime. Certainly praying is, davening is against their regime. And he told me, beware, next time, if I find you in the snow, without any explanation, I will put you in the punishment room. Okay, punishment room is not dangerous. And then I will tell you another story of keeping Shabbos. As I mentioned, we arranged with a man that was in charge of reporting the production of during the day. I would prepare in beforehand all necessary production, and then he would report to the authorities that Mendelevitch is working on Shabbos. I would go to work to the factory, staying there. Again, I had my shelter, a very secret place that I could watch the guards entering, and the moment they would come, I would escape to the general place, just to mixing with other prisoners. They couldn't find out who is working and who is not. And it worked for a certain time. Then, once being on Shabbos in davening, I heard heavy steps in my bag. So I turned around to escape, but they blocked my way. There was the head of the prison himself with some other officers, so I understood they know that I am keeping Shabbos. And then it was Major Fedorov, the head of the prison, told me very quietly, he enjoyed taking me in trap, and he told me, Mendelevitch, why are you not working? You know that if you would like to eat, you have to deserve your food. Please go to work. So again, if it would be by chance, I would pretend myself going. But I understood that they know that I don't work on Shabbos, so I answered him in the very quiet manner. I told, Major Fedorov, I'm a Jew. Jew don't work on Shabbos. Then he became really angry. He is reddish, so he became red and started yelling and telling me, what? You think you are in a restaurant? As somebody could mistake it, this is not a restaurant. You are in my hands. If you refuse to go to work, I will put you on the ground. You will die there. So I certainly had pikuach nefesh, right? If I could call my rabbi and consult whether it's pikuach nefesh or not, maybe he would have another approach. But I told to myself, right now there is no danger for me, he's just yelling at me. Let him put me under the ground, and if I feel that I am going to die, I maybe reconsider. But so far there is no problem. So I told, don't yell at me, I am not afraid of you. I have my Lord. He told me that I can go to war. So take him to a punishment block. There was not a specific one punishment room, a whole prison of punishment rooms. So 2 Russian soldiers came to escort me, and you can see me going through the snow from the Enterprise to this prison. And as we say, Mia mini Michalu mismoli Gavri. I looked to the Russian soldiers, they feel like really malochim, They are bringing me mamesh tachas kitzei kavod. I thought to myself, what a privilege, I thought. Thank you, Ribono Shel Olam, that you enable me to be punished for keeping Shabbos. I thought to myself, maybe there is nobody else except of me that being told go to work on Shabbos, and I refuse. So it was a pleasant time, to do something for Shabbos, the biggest mitzvah. So I stayed there for a week, and later on, after a week, they opened the door, Mendelevitch, you can go. Where? It was Shabbos. To go to work. I told, no, I prefer to stay in a punishment room. So after a week again, and then again and again, until they understood that I am very comfortable in a punishment room. There is no problem for me to stay there. For indeed, Ribono Shel Olam created human beings able to go on with some pieces of bread, some water. That's so, So I never felt, to know that I'm getting punishment for Shabbos. Yeah, I'm ready to pay for that. So finally, they took me out to a city, to a court, and they accused me of violating their rules and negatively influencing all other prisoners. I mean, Kiruv, it's negatively influencing. And then being a parasite, refusing to work on Shabbos, 3 years of imprisonment under specifically severe conditions. So it was a different place. It took me out from the prison. When I come to the second prison, the first question that I asked, what kind of jobs they have here, to find out maybe I can escape violating Shabbos. And then the supervisor that I asked told, there is no occupation for you. He told, it is a prison for the heads of mafia. If we let people go out from the cells, you will kill each other. So better stay in your cells, like animals in the cages. It was, a biggest information. For I told, what? For 3 years I will have no troubles of keeping Shabbos. It means the Goyim punished me for keeping Shabbos. They were not aware that they are praising me. It's a benefit. 3 years there is no occupation for you. So, as we say, mitzvah gareres mitzvah, right? I did one, I deserved, and then I had a talis cotton that was not permitted to have in this concentration camp. I managed to smuggle tzitzis inside the cell in the prison and made my talis out from the tzitzis. It's now in Yerushalayim, and there is a museum, Judaica museum, so you can see and come and see it. Anyway, and then I smuggled inside, even at Tanakh. How? And we were permitted request newspapers published in Russia. And I requested, there was only one newsletter or monthly, Sovetish Heimland. So I was requested to train my Yiddish, and then all of a sudden, before I was sent for Shabbos to the specific prison, I got a whole book as an addition to the newsletter. It was the speeches of Comrade Brezhnev in Yiddish. So I was glad that a Jew make parnosa translating all the speeches of Comrade Brezhnev in Yiddish, and I decided, when being sent to the prison, to take the book with me again to train myself in Yiddish. And then on the way, I looked at the format of the speeches of Brezhnev and my Tanakh book. It was the same size. So I took the first page of the speeches of Brezhnev, for it is written with olive base, right? See, speeches of Brezhnev, Yiddish is like olive base, and in the bottom, written in Russian language, permitted by the authorities. So I made some glue from bread, chewed bread, and I glue inside my Tanakh that is the speeches of Comrade Brezhnev. So it was chometz, I had to sell it on Pesach, but at least I could use it. And it's how, as I say, mitzvah gereretz mitzvah, I got Shabbos, mitzvah tzitzis, and even mitzvah of learning Torah. So, a long story, for 3 years more. Sorry, I was not prepared to come to you, otherwise I would bring my books that tell you that I have a book, Unbroken Spirit, telling the whole small stories. Later on, I was released. I finished my 3 years. I sent back to the concentration camp, and it turned out that when I was in this specific Vladimir prison, all my friends being released, including Dimshitz and Kuznetsov. How it happened that time, maybe people of my age remember that there were SALT negotiation of nuclear disarmament. And the Eden here in America were enough smart to put like a humanitarian step to build immune from both sides, that they will release a prisoner of Zion. So my friends were released. That time, when I didn't know it, I was together with the former chairman of Jewish Agency, Anatoly Sharansky. So I asked him, what is with me? He told, there are 2 steps in SALT ratification. For first step, they are being released, and the next step, when it will be ratified by the Senate, I will be released, him, means Sharansky, you, Mendelevitch, and there was a famous woman, Aida Nude. But it never happened, for the Russians invaded Afghanistan, and it is why I stayed alone in the prison. I was not alone. Some more Jews were brought in this concentration camp. So I continued to educate, to make care of them, and then being angry with it and understanding that I have some sforim, the authorities made a search, and they found that I have a lot of books in Hebrew, sforim, whatever, and textbooks, whatever. Everything was confiscated. So I asked myself, why the God, Ribbon Shalom, would permit to take Jewish books from me? Certainly he is punishing me. What was wrong? So I decided maybe the reasons that I make my tshuva, so-called Tinok Shenishba, or tshuva anyway, when I was at age 20, and economized on his Taniyos, fasts, whatever. So I decided I will return back. I will declare a prolonged hunger strike that until they would give me back my sforim, I will continue to have the hunger strike. And as far as I was aware that they will enjoy me dying without eating, so I managed to inform friends, refusniks in Moscow, that I am starting a prolonged hunger strike, and for a reason that then I asked them to pass over the knowledge in the UN Human Rights Commission. So it took time. I was, normally if you are not eating, a person can die in a week. So it was why normally we would declare formally that we are drinking water. With water you can go on for almost 100 days. It was not pleasant to drink the water, for after 3 days of hunger strike, the organism eats itself, and it doesn't accept from outside. So we had to add salt in the water to drink it, otherwise it was disgusting. Anyway, I spent two months in a punishment room, for it was considered a violation, hunger. They would say, if you don't eat, you cannot work in the factory. So if you violate our regime, after 2 months of hunger strike, another head of the prison, it was that time Major Zhuravkov, entered my punishment room. He was very angry, and he told me, "What? You continue to struggle against our regime?" I told, "Never, never. We fought against your regime. We fight. Permit us be Jewish. Give us our books. You confiscated my books. What can I do? I protest." So we negotiated, and he gives some, not all this for him. I decided to stop my hunger strike. Still, I'm not going to harm my health. And it turned later on that the moment the knowledge of my hunger strike arrived the UN Human Rights Commission, there was discussion that the Russian representative blamed, as usually, Israel for violating the human rights of the Arabs, and then an American representative stood up and told, "You Russians have the right to speak about human rights. There is a Jewish boy that's going to die because you confiscated his Bible, you call it human rights." So the Russian diplomat called up Kremlin and certainly it started moving. So after being there on the hunger strike, it was again the eve of Hanukkah. I had no Hanukkah to light and no candles, but I simply had a piece of bread, and I made holes in the bread, and I had linen threads. So I dipped them in some vegetable oil, and for a while it can stand. So I lightened my candles. It was my 11th year of imprisonment, and I told Ribono Shel Olam, I know that Eretz Yisrael niknes b'Yisurim. And then I had an idea, Eretz Yisrael is Aleph Yud. And my imprisonment, Yud Aleph 11. So I thought maybe for my Yud Aleph, I deserve to your Aleph Yud. And it happened. Mamish, after a month, I was taken directly from the prison by airplane to Moscow, in their headquarters of KGB. And after a while, I was announced that because of my bad behavior, I don't deserve anymore to be considered Soviet citizen. They canceled my Soviet citizenship, and they are sending me away. So when I heard it, I told, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Shmo, whatever. So the colonel that announced me told me, what you are telling there, I thought that, we have to thank God for the miracle he produced right on the spot. He told, what miracle, Understand, we are sending you away from your motherland. You are glad. I told, in no way you are sending to my motherland. Why should we feel bad? He told, okay, we know, you Jews can explain everything. Then they got me a black suit from Pierre Cardin, a black hat, put me in a big car, and directly from the prison, they would go directly to the airport, escorted by police on motorbikes. So the colonels that escorted me told, see, we are giving you honor like you are a president. I thought to myself, I am not a president. My grandfather Yosef was prime minister to Pharaoh of Egypt, so I deserve some kind of honor. Anyway, when we arrived to the airport, I was led directly to the airplane, and when, before going up, I told to the colonel, for I figured that he may be a head of a Jewish department in KGB, I told him, see, you arrested us 11 years ago in the airport to prevent us to go out. I was aware that at that time already almost 300,000 Jews got permission to leave. 300,000 Jews is only a half of Shishim River. So I thought, it is not enough, officer. You have to let every Jew to go away. If not, your empire will collapse. So interestingly, this officer admitted, and he told me, we never could believe that you Jews have this strong will of you. And I interpreted it differently. Before being arrested, I taught my students in my underground Ulpan this famous proverb, Ein davar ha'omed bifnei haratzon. Nothing can withstand haratzon, a specific will. Whose will? The Ribono Shel Olam. The Soviets believed, arresting us, that we fall in a trap and they finish us. If they turn out that, true, they are superpower. But there is another superpower much more mighty than them. It's Am Yisrael that leaded by Ribono Shel Olam. It is how I interpreted it to myself. We followed the Ratzon of Hashem, and it is why they had to give up. So, and as I predicted, Russia collapsed, and Am Yisrael Yitzeh Biyad Ramah. Thank you.